All right. I think what I will want to do here. Oh, no, wait. Let's stop the recording. And also, let me share my screen. And then we'll get going.
Wow. Amazing.
Just looking how it should. There. Okay. And
Great.
George, I will turn it over to you to get us started.
Great. So good afternoon and evening, people. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, you're on mute, though.
Oh, I'm not? I'm not muted now. I'm not muted on my end.
You're talking, but we can't hear you.
Okay, well,
I know we could hear you earlier. I think you just have muted yourself.
I have not muted myself.
No?
Nope. Not muted on this side. La guerre.
Unmute. Shoot.
I know. Greg.
Are you sure?
Yep.
I'm not sure what's up, George, because I could hear you just fine in all of our practice, but you're gone now.
I am. I'm sorry.
Annoying.
I don't know what to do. I can call in on my
phone. But
you want me to call in on my phone?
I guess try again.
Try to what?
Okay. Actually, it was on my end. You're good.
Okay.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Right. No worries. Glad the technology works. I'm not that big a fan of technology, and that might be why. But thanks to everybody. Good evening, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us with Why the World Needs Move to Amend. And the fact that you're on this webinar with us on Facebook Live or joining by Zoom means you have some sense of why the world needs move to amend. And we appreciate that energy and that enthusiasm for real democracy. And Caitlin, why don't you share with us why you've shared the screen and what's going on?
Well, first of all, hey, everybody. My name is Caitlin Sposi-Belknap. I'm Move to Amend's National Director, and George Friday is one of our board members and founding members, and she probably said that when I couldn't hear her. Thanks for joining us. So we're going to walk you through a little bit of background and why this issue is so important, and then also kind of talk about our current situation and welcome any questions or comments and feedback from you. So first of all, you should be hearing us, and we can't really do tech support during the call, but this is being recorded. And so if you have difficulties, you could always tune into the recording later. We will email it to everyone who registered. So Move to Amend's mission is that we are committed to social and economic justice, ending corporate rule, and building a vibrant democracy that is genuinely accountable to the people, not corporate interests. And our goals are to pass the We the People Amendment to make clear that artificial entities do not have constitutional rights and that money is not speech. And also to provoke discussion and organizing about how to make real the promise of American democracy through constitutional renewal for all people. So our principles and values include anti-oppression and solidarity organizing. When we're talking about personhood as a general concept, it's important that we recognize that from this country's founding, not everyone who is a human being has been recognized as a human being under law. And in fact, that reality at that founding violence that this country was started with is much of why we are in the situation that we're in today, where we have property, which is what a corporation is, having more rights than human beings. And so we can't really be in that conversation without looking at oppression and privilege. And then the way out of that is through solidarity organizing. And we do that through building coalitions and building movements, working with movements that already exist, and really trying to kind of help us all see that what it really comes down to is democracy and power. And so all of our work for social justice could be under the umbrella of a democracy movement. And if we recognize it as such, that'll be ever more important and strategic for our success, because democracy is about power. And do we have the power to implement the solutions that we know that the world needs or not? We also are firmly committed to grassroots organizing. All of us who are on the national team, we may be working nationally now, but our background and our roots are in grassroots organizing, because that's where people are in your communities with the people that you live and work with. And that's how we can most effectively build power, is through grassroots organizing. We also have a dedication to political education, because every successful movement before us has had that dedication of kind of learning more and more, peeling back the layers of the onion to understand the situation that we're in, to best move to the solutions and the best strategy to get there. And so we have to have that dedication to political education and recognize that whatever we know now, there's more that we can learn. And we have to be able to evolve and grow and have that commitment and dedication. And then Move to Amend has a commitment to political and economic independence. Independence from any political party, independence from any economic supporters. So, that's part of why we are grassroots funded, and we're committed to staying that way. And we are not officially aligned with any political party. We work with people in any political party who share our values and principles and goals. And we may need to work towards building alternative political parties if the ones that exist right now do not share our values and goals. And we're down to do that as well. So our strategy for working on the amendment and moving forward these deeper conversations about constitutional renewal and democracy for all is to focus primarily on the American people, not Congress. Our amendment has been introduced in Congress, and we do some work on Capitol Hill and with Congress members, to be sure. But our focus and our main targets are the American people, because this is about building a movement for power. And like I said earlier, we think the best way to do that is through coalition building, working with other organizations that are already working on issues that are affected by corporate power, because our amendment would help bolster all of our movements and all of our organizations and work. And so making those connections is really key in terms of our strategy. We have to be intentional about making sure that our movement is broad and diverse, that it's multiracial and intergenerational. And those things, sound good on paper, but they don't actually come together and work and happen unless we put in intentional and strategic thought, time, training, and skills building in these areas, because we live in an incredibly segregated country around race. We are pretty segregated too in terms of just different cultures in different parts of this country. This is a continent, really, more than a country. And also our movements, if you look at technology and then just what's affecting people's lives, people who are of different generations have really different experiences and ways that we communicate, what we're comfortable with. And so all of those things require intentionality if we're going to transcend the differences and build bridges past the differences. And so that's part of our strategy as well. A commitment to community organizing, not just activism. I mean, especially in this day and age where, we're sort of given the impression that if we, sign a petition or like a post, that somehow or other we're making a difference in the world. And it can be important to share information, but organizing is about building relationships, and then those relationships can be drawn upon to build power. And so that's what we need to actually be doing. And if we're not organizing and we're just or even in person going to a rally and then everybody goes home, but we actually haven't built any power and capacity, then we're not actually really going to move ourselves forward. And so a commitment to holding ourselves to that standard of organizing, not just activism. And then again, like I said, focusing on the grassroots level. And one of the main tactics that we use to do that is passing local and state resolutions calling for the amendment, where we have communities calling on Congress and really exposing whether our government is following the will of the people or not. And that's sort of one of the first steps towards then fixing it so that it does, is helping people to stand up and say, this is what we want you to do. So that's one of our main tactics that we use. So when we said, why the world needs Move to Amend, wanted to ask you what you think the biggest issues facing humanity are. and we put some examples there. So I'm actually going to put this up in a poll and ask you to answer. What do you think the biggest issue facing humanity is? And you can go ahead and just click on your choice and let us know what you think. And those of you who are on Facebook, you can't click on the poll, I don't think, but if you want to put in the comments your answer to the question, then by all means, please go ahead. All right, let's see. So we've got 44% of folks saying, 40% of folks saying climate change, 30% of folks saying war, 10% saying hunger, and a couple of people chose other. And if you want to type in the chat what your other option, what you think the other issue is, then feel free to do that. So I think this allows you to see. So yeah, all of these issues are obviously important and critical. All right, so we've got another question for you. What do you think is the biggest issue facing Americans? We've got lack of affordable and accessible healthcare, pollution, massive incarceration, police militarization and violence, surveillance of citizens, and wars for foreign oil. And you'll get a chance to vote on this one as well. So what do you think out of these is the biggest issue facing Americans? And again, if you're tuning in via Facebook, feel free to comment with the answer to the question from your perspective. Also, if you chose other, feel free to chat what you think the answer is that's not on this list, and I'd be happy to read it out so that others hear that as well. So a lot of people are saying lack of accessible and affordable healthcare. Some folks are saying police militarization and violence, and then some people are saying other. So I'd love to hear what your other thoughts are in the chat. So let's go ahead and, but more than half of you said that it was healthcare, lack of access to healthcare and unaffordable healthcare. All right, so why haven't these issues been solved? Like, for example, with healthcare, we know how we could have affordable and accessible healthcare for everyone, right? We could have Medicare for all, we could have a single payer system, and we certainly would have, millions of people have access to healthcare who don't yet, or who can't, or who it's an incredible burden on them in order to have healthcare, right? Climate change. We also know what the solutions are in terms of climate change, right? We need to drastically reduce our fossil fuel use, and we need to shift the way that our society is powered and energized. But we're barely doing anything in these directions, right? And if it's happening, it's mostly happening on the part of individuals as consumers rather than, as a society. So my next question to you is, did these problems begin with Citizens United? So remember, Citizens United happened in 2010 in January. It was a Supreme Court decision that really did open the floodgates to big money in politics, corporate PAC money, and money from wealthy individuals as well through super PACs. But all of these issues that we've named were well underway, easily defined as critical problems before 2009. And so the problem did not begin with Citizens United. And if we look at the solution as we need to reverse Citizens United and overturn Citizens United through a constitutional amendment, then that actually doesn't address any of the problems that were underway before Citizens United, all of these systemic issues that we've named, and there are more. Right, so if we're going to talk about amending the Constitution, let's just do a little bit of background for a second about the Constitution, make sure we're all on the same page. So reminder that there are two ways to amend the Constitution. There is the option for 2/3 of both houses of Congress to pass an amendment resolution, and then 3/4 of state legislatures have to ratify that amendment proposal. The other way that is spelled out in the Constitution, with not a lot of detail, but it is in there, is that 2/3 of state legislatures can call for a convention to propose an amendment, and then 3/4 of states must ratify that proposal that comes out of a convention as well. So the first option is the one that has been used to amend the Constitution so far, but the other option is in the Constitution as well, and is perhaps a more populist, not popular, but populist way, more, with state legislatures rather than having to go all the way up to Congress. So let's just keep that in mind. Move to amend is mostly pursuing the first option with our House Joint Resolution 48, but we have said that we absolutely cannot take the second option off the table because that potentially might be necessary if Congress refuses to act, and it is the most populist way to amend the Constitution. And if we can build a movement for democracy, then that might be a very strategic choice down the road. And also as a way to make sure that Congress does move forward in case they will not. It would be, in the past, sometimes when Congress has gotten stuck, the threat of a convention is what has helped to make them see the light and then move an amendment forward. So we certainly wouldn't want to take that option off the table if we need to. So then let's talk about, okay, so if we're talking about amending the Constitution, let's make sure we understand the Constitution. So I'm just going to do a really quick and dirty kind of framing of the way the Constitution works. So you have two entities in the Constitution. There's we the people, the first three words, and then there's government. And it talks about the relationship between these two parties. So the idea is that we the people are free and sovereign. We have individual rights, which are spelled out in mostly the amendments, right? The Bill of Rights and then the subsequent amendments. And there's some other rights in some other parts of the Constitution. And then we're seen as private parties, private entities. And then on the flip side, there's government, and government is subordinate and accountable. The idea is that it's accountable to the people. To the extent that government has any powers, those are delegated by the people. And government has collective duties. So there's no duties that we as individual people have in the Constitution, right? Government is who have duties, and then we have, collective duties when we kind of all come together, again, like in a government setting. And then government is public. So that's the concept, that's the idea. We absolutely have to jump in here right away, though, and point out that when the Constitution was written and for generations subsequent, we the people did not include most people. In fact, it was the overwhelming majority of people were left out of that legal definition. So it actually was only 5 to 8% of the population, wealthy, white, propertied men who were Christian. In some states, you actually had to belong to the Christian religion in order to be able to participate and vote, were seen as people, were allowed to assert their individual rights under law, had that sovereignty that the Constitution spells out. And Howard Zinn pointed out that you can actually look at the story of this country. The history of this country is the story of all the rest of us driving ourselves into this document because of the choices, which were not just, oh, that was the times. Women immediately said, what about us? People who were enslaved immediately said, how does this jive with all the principles in the Declaration of Independence to have us in bondage? Native people were fighting for their against the colonialism and theft of their land and genocide of their people from the very beginning, and actually had a number of tribes and societies had frameworks that were much more egalitarian and democratic than the Constitution even offered, right? And so it was a debate from the beginning, a debate which most of us lost out on and so then had to rectify over generations of building movements to make what we now think of as the Constitution, which is really the collection of amendments to the original document, right? When we think of our freedoms as spelled out in the Constitution, we think of amendments. We think of the First Amendment. We think of maybe the Second Amendment. We think of the Fourth Amendment, protection against search and seizure and privacy. We think of the 14th Amendment, equal protection of the law. Those are all amendments. Those were all additions later that our foremothers and forefathers fought for to make sure that this document actually meant anything related to the supposed ideals of the democratic revolution that we had against England, right? So corporations, though, are not mentioned anywhere in the Constitution, and that's not an accident. Corporations existed at the time. It's not like airplanes, where, you know, of course you wouldn't say anything about airplanes in the Constitution or in the founding law because they didn't exist yet. Well, corporations did exist, but they chose not to write them into the Constitution, and in fact, states were responsible for chartering corporations, and these early corporations had incredible limits on them. They were able to exist only for a certain amount of time. They weren't allowed to own other corporations. They weren't allowed to give civic contributions. In fact, it was a felony in Wisconsin and many other states until the 1950s to give money to a campaign, for a corporation to give money to a political campaign. Limited liability was restricted. You couldn't have interlocking boards of directors. And these corporations had to exist for a specific purpose, and they couldn't really operate outside the bounds of that specific purpose. And those directors had to live in the state where a corporation did business. And the ultimate threshold, the thing that was required in order to bring a corporation into existence in the first place, was that it had to serve the public good. So properly understood, corporations are over here on this government side of the line because they're created by government, and they are subordinate and accountable, and they have collective duties. And they are not entirely private entities because they wouldn't exist if we, through our government, did not allow them to come into existence. And at the time of the founding of this country, we had personhood all completely backwards and upside down and wrong with incredibly violent ramifications. But in terms of property, it was understood that in order to form a corporation, you need government to bring you into being. And then with that comes a bunch of responsibilities and duties and transparency. But after the Civil War, well, let's go back over here for a second. After the Civil War, you have a whole collection of people, African Americans who had been enslaved, who drove themselves they were the first wave of people to drive themselves into the Constitution with the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. And immediately on the heels of that, you had the women's rights movement. That was actually part of the abolition movement, also saying, you know, women should have, originally demanding an equal rights amendment to the Constitution for women, and then it turned into a right to vote. And so though that 5% of the population that was able to blissfully be in charge because they had defined everyone else as not a person, suddenly their hold on the whole situation became a lot more shaky. And we also had the Industrial Revolution come to the United States, and the corporation becomes the instrument of corporate capitalism and manifest destiny. And it's not an accident that railroads become the tool that the ruling elite use to sneak corporations into the Constitution. So it happens with this case in 1886, May 10th. So anniversary just happened in 1886 here in California, where the court actually didn't rule on corporate personhood, although there were a number of cases before and after the Santa Clara case where, especially after, where they more explicitly did. But this was the interesting case where it was sort of initially mentioned in the headnotes, where the court supposedly, kind of unclear whether this really even happened, said, but this is what the record shows, that they said, we do not wish to hear the question of whether a corporation has rights under the 14th Amendment, because we are all of the opinion that it does. And so basically this was the 14th Amendment says that states cannot deny equal protection under the law. It was put in place with an eye towards making sure that segregation didn't happen, right? So that the law would treat everyone equally, regardless of whether they had been a slave or had darker skin. And the Supreme Court interpreted that to include corporations and meant that all of the laws that states and communities had that treated corporations different than other kinds of business were supposedly unconstitutional. And it's worth noting that then subsequently the Supreme Court enshrined segregation and actually said, no, the 14th Amendment doesn't protect African Americans. In fact, it actually only protects corporations, basically, in effect. So they use that initial platform of the 14th Amendment. Charlie, can you shut this door, please? Maybe the one outside. Sorry, thank you. And we're able to gain a whole number of rights after that. So I'm going to run through them really quickly. And the main point of all of this is this happened way before Citizens United. So if all we do is overturn Citizens United, then we won't address any of this standing law that was all built by the Supreme Court and corporate lawyers kind of behind our backs when folks were paying attention to other things. And if we waste the opportunity that we have with this amendment movement and only just go back to 2009, there will be this whole body of work to be done. And the only organization that is working on a constitutional amendment that is doing all that work is Move to Amend. So Hale v. Hinkle is when corporations get Fourth Amendment search and seizure protections. One of the justices who disagreed said that the power of the government by its representatives to look into the books, records, and papers of a corporation of its own creation to ascertain whether that corporation has obeyed or is defying the law will be greatly curtailed, if not destroyed. Dodge versus Ford Motor Company is a Michigan Supreme Court decision. So I told you earlier that corporations had this threshold of having to serve the public good in order to come into existence in the first place. Well, this case did away with that. And instead, the court ruled that the purpose of a corporation is to maximize profit for shareholders. So it's no longer to serve the public good in some way or to be accountable to the public at all. It's only to maximize profit for shareholders, and any party in a corporation, like a CEO or any other person, can actually be personally sued by a stockholder if they feel as though their actions are not maximizing their profit. So completely turned around what the purpose of a corporation is. And this, when you go to law school, is what they teach you. So it's important for us to recognize that this is a construct. It has changed over time, and we certainly could change it back. This is not inevitable. It's not actually in the DNA fabric of a corporation. It's something that we put there as human beings that are supposedly in charge of the situation. And we could adjust it, as we have found that when we have corporations that only exist to maximize profit for shareholders, that ruins the planet and literally kills people. And so we maybe don't need institutions that work like that for the common good, and we could dismantle them and change it. Pennsylvania Coal Company versus Mahon is when corporations get Fifth Amendment takings clause. So the Fifth Amendment says that the government cannot take your property without compensating you for it, right? So in this case, they actually ruled that a regulation by government was a takings under the Fifth Amendment. And the story of this is that the coal industry was digging under people's homes in Pennsylvania to get coal, and collapsing, entire communities were collapsing in these sinkholes. And so the government of Pennsylvania passed a law saying that the coal industry could not do that. And the coal industry sued Pennsylvania and said, okay, you can pass that law, but you have to pay us for all of the profits lost because you passed that law. And you would have to pay us for the money that we would have made if you had not. And they ruled a regulation, a takings. So what this means, and I've been an elected official, and I know that this is true, that when you're looking to try and protect your community, your lawyer as a city or a village or a water district will tell you, you have to be careful in terms of what kinds of restrictions you put on corporations that are operating in your community, because they could sue us, and then we could be required to compensate them for profits lost. And so when a community wants to protect itself from fracking by banning fracking, that's not available to them unless they're willing to pay for the profits that that company would have made had they continued fracking. And so, you know, protecting the public is basically elected officials at the local level and the state level. Hands are tied when trying to protect the public against corporations that are causing harm. Lois K. Leggett versus Lee was an attempt on the part of a community in Florida to protect their local economy. So they tried to tax a chain store higher than taxing local business because they wanted to encourage local businesses, because they knew that when the money gets spent locally, it actually helps generate, you know, wealth for the community and keep the wealth in the community. And the chain store sued that Florida community and said, you cannot discriminate against us as a one kind of business from the other kinds of businesses. Under the 14th Amendment and the Interstate Commerce Clause, you can't discriminate against us. And so again, this is while segregation is still legal, so they're happy to allow the 14th Amendment to be used to discriminate against African Americans, or, you know, to not use the 14th Amendment to protect against discrimination of African Americans, but for corporations, yeah, we definitely want to ensure that equal protection. Skip forward some decades to Buckley v. Vallejo, when the corporate America gets its sights on the First Amendment. So first, in this case, this is kind of the second piece of the move to amendment proposal. It would be to overturn this case. So the Supreme Court ruled that political speech and spending money are the same, and it expanded First Amendment protections to include financial contributions to candidates or parties. So what this does is it means that if spending money in the political process is tied in with the First Amendment, then that means the people with more money, or corporations, but in this case it also applies to human beings, people with more money have more access to the First Amendment than those with less money. The First Amendment, in my book, and I think that most Americans would agree, is meant to be, you know, an equalizing force, a way to ensure equality, that we all have a right to speak, we all have a right to participate, but if we tie it in with money, then actually that's not the case, and the people with more money are the ones who get more First Amendment rights. And then this case came right after that, where the Supreme Court overruled a law in Massachusetts that had banned corporations from contributing money to the ballot initiative process, which had been long-standing. Every ballot initiative state, like California here where I live, had rules that kept corporations from participating in the initiative process, and this case said that those laws were unconstitutional. And so we see now that whenever you have an issue on the ballot, those with the most money are really the ones who are determining what the outcome will be. So even if you've got something like we had on the ballot here in California a few years ago that would lower the cost of pharmaceutical drugs, well, the pharmaceutical industry poured millions of dollars into that campaign and were able to shift public opinion through advertising and lies. And then people voted against their own best interests and voted down that initiative. And then even further, again, on the First Amendment, in 1996, Vermont passed a law requiring that bovine growth hormone dairy products be labeled. The dairy industry sued Vermont and made the case under the First Amendment. This law violates our First Amendment rights because we have a right not to speak. And you can't force us to put something on that label because that's our property, and we have a right not to speak under the First Amendment. And the Supreme Court agreed. So this is why any labeling law is potentially in jeopardy, and we've seen this happen with genetically modified foods, bovine growth hormone, Monsanto's Roundup, and cancer-causing ingredients. Here in California, we passed a law saying that anything that causes cancer has to be labeled as such, and Monsanto has sued California and got an injunction so that that doesn't have to be on their product. And so, yes, we do still have some labeling, but at any point, if a company were to decide that they didn't really want to have to label under this argument, perhaps the Supreme Court would agree that they actually we can't make them tell us what's in the products that are out there in the world. And then Citizens United versus the Federal Election Commission in 2010, we've already talked about some. This overturned McCain-Feingold, which was actually a pretty weak campaign finance legislation that Congress had in effect that limited to some degree how much money was being spent, especially by third parties, by the super PACs. And 24 states had campaign finance laws that, as a result of Citizens United, were overturned as unconstitutional, trying to protect the public, to make sure that we know where the money is coming from, and also that one party isn't able to just dominate the electoral process with their money. That's all got done away with through Citizens United. And the court basically doubled down and reiterated that, yes, it does believe that corporations have constitutional rights. And then they didn't stop there. A couple of years later, they passed this McCutcheon versus FEC decision, which there had been limits on the amount aggregate that individuals could spend in federal elections. Again, to try and make it so that no one party was basically buying the whole election, because we have people who are wealthy enough to do that now. And McCutcheon versus FEC said, nope, that's a violation of those very wealthy people's First Amendment rights. We can't actually limit how much money they contribute to political campaigns. And then Burwell versus Hobby Lobby stores, this is another case that, again, if we overturn Citizens United, would not help us at all, where the court ruled that corporations have religious freedom. So Hobby Lobby is owned by religious fundamentalists who don't believe in birth control, and they sued the government because of the Affordable Care Act and said that they did not want to have to pay for reproductive health for their employees. And the court agreed that they didn't have to, because that violated not just the individual owner's religious freedom, but the religious freedom of Hobby Lobby, of the corporation. So we have a situation now where the whole reason why you incorporate is because there's this limited liability idea. You're separate from your corporation, you're taxed separately, you're held liable separately, and you're not the same as your corporation. So there's this separation. But at the same time, if you want to make the case that your most personal ethical beliefs that really just apply to you personally and nobody else, your corporation is somehow going to be infused with those, but all the other separations still exist. Never mind all of the other individuals that are involved in the corporation and what their religious beliefs might be. It's what the owners believe, and that the corporation actually has religious freedom. And initially, the Supreme Court ruled that this only applied to closely held corporations, like a family corporation like Hobby Lobby is. But the Trump administration has actually expanded that and is interpreting it to apply to all corporations. So all corporations have religious freedoms, which we don't know the full extent that this might be used to discriminate against people for religious reasons. Of not sharing the same religion, or LGBTQ folks, or who knows. It's a very dangerous ruling, and has nothing to do with Citizens United or money in politics. So if we just say Congress has the authority again to regulate campaign spending, that doesn't help us with Hobby Lobby at all. So when corporations move over to the we the people side of the line, it basically perverts the entire system. So you see the X through it, because it makes it so we cannot meaningfully regulate corporations in any way, shape, or form at the end of the day. Democracy is unconstitutional, and that's why we use the tagline, legalize democracy. So I want to talk next about House Joint Resolution 48 and kind of like what the answer is to all that and our current situation. And then we'll open it up for questions, and we definitely will end by 4. But I just want to, for a second here, make sure that, George, do you have anything to add in terms of, just kind of why it is so important that this approach be what we take and not a Band-Aid solution?
Because we need a real solution. We don't need a short-term solution. We also are not likely to have an opportunity to make such a vital and important step for the country and for generations to come. It's hard to realize where we are in terms of this moment in history. And think about it yourself. You can't imagine that the suffragettes knew, oh my goodness, this is it. This is it. This is the moment. We have to really rally. I know that folks in the civil rights movement had several times when they took a pause and said, okay, we've got to get through this next piece. For the 28th Amendment to have the opportunity to address all of the inequities that are plaguing our country and continue to plague us without any real remedy, we need to get to the root causes, which we know how to do, using really excellent organizing and community building skills so that we have the power to make real the promise of democracy in this country.
Thanks, George. So the solution from our perspective is the We the People Amendment, House Joint Resolution 48. It makes clear that artificial entities, any entity created by government, does not have constitutional rights. It makes clear that spending money on elections is not protected by the First Amendment. So it wipes away the two doctrines that are not in the Constitution. It's not even a mistake that the framers made, and they were full of mistakes. It's something that was created by the Supreme Court later on that they really had no authority to do, and it addresses both of those in the systemic and clear and simple and common sense way. And then it also requires that campaign spending be publicly disclosed, and I'm sorry, because duh, of course we need to know where the money comes from, right? And that's the next target of the people who are behind Citizens United, is they would actually like to get the court to interpret the First Amendment to say that even disclosure and letting the public know who is spending the money is a violation of the First Amendment rights of those donors. And we have 54 House co-sponsors. Our lead is Rick Nolan from Minnesota. We have over 800 cities and towns that have passed resolutions calling for this amendment, calling on their Congress members to pass this amendment. 19 states, including 4 states by ballot initiative, Montana, Colorado, California, and Washington. Hundreds of thousands of citizen volunteers across this country, and organizations, labor unions, faith congregations that have also stepped up, endorsed, and/or passed resolutions. Move to Amend is the only amendment group with a strategic plan. We adopted it in 2016. It's a 10-year plan. So this would have us getting the amendment passed through Congress in 2026. Many of you might be feeling like, oh my gosh, we can't wait that long. And I agree with you. But if you look at the current situation, which is what we did to put together this plan, we recognize that we have to be real about how far away, and this is before Trump was even president, right? How far away we are from any semblance of a real democracy in this country. So, that's one of the things that Move to Amend is very committed to, is not sort of glossing over the reality that we take ourselves seriously enough, and we take you seriously enough to say this is their current situation. It's not good. And yet people have been in as dire circumstances in terms of looking like it was as unachievable as we are at now, ending slavery. Women taking, decades and decades and decades to even be recognized as human beings and get a right to vote, right? And they still persevered. And so if we want to do it faster than 10 years, then by all means, what the strategic plan provides us is the steps, and we just need to grow faster and bigger, and we could do that too. And so there's no reason why we would wait, but we also have a ways to go, and we have to be real about that, I think, as the starting point. And George, feel free to jump in if there's anything you want to add. You can find the plan online. Move to Amend is committed to transparency, and so that is why we've made the plan available. And like I said, we're the only amendment group that has that, and so that allows folks to give us feedback and say, this is missing, or this is we're behind on this. What are we going to do? And we took a bit of a risk to put it out there, but that's because that's how we are. That's how we roll.
It is a living document. It's a document that we visit, we evaluate, we tweak as we need to, and we look to our leadership, meaning the people who are out there, who are part of our affiliates, who are growing in affiliates, to help guide the process, because it rests in our hands. And thank y'all for that.
Absolutely. So we have a number of programs and campaigns. I'm not going to explain them all. You can find details on our website. Pledge to Amend is a campaign targeting candidates, getting them to pledge when they run for office, not just federal office, but any level. We lobby to bring more co-sponsors on to the We the People Amendment. We have an amazing internship program where we train young people on how to run an organization and how to be part of not just this movement, but the organizing skills needed to do any movement building. Looking at direct action as a critical tactic that's always been a component of successful movements. And so how do we build that in to Move to Amend? We offer organizing, training, and support. We have chapters, we call them affiliates all over the country, and so we offer support. Our Leadership Summit is a conference we do every 2 years, and we are doing it again next month. Will be our second Leadership Summit in Washington, D.C. Our movement education program goes to some of the stuff that we talked about in the beginning in terms of the skills. If we're going to build an intergenerational and multiracial movement, we're not an intergenerational and multiracial country. I mean, we are, but we don't operate like we are, right? We have segregated people who are, even in activist worlds, who are working separately and siloed. And so how do we get the skills to transcend that? So we put together a program, a training for our grassroots leadership, and other organizations have actually used that as well. Our barnstorming tours, we travel the country and do speaking events to educate and mobilize people on this issue. And then the resolutions to amend, we've already mentioned several times, getting communities to pass resolutions calling for the amendment. So here you see just some graphics to kind of show the growth that we see necessary. And, we are actually, well ahead of our goals in terms of House sponsors. We're a little behind. We haven't got our amendment introduced in the Senate yet. So that's part of what we're trying to shore up with our lobby day next month in DC. But again, all of this is out there so that we can kind of hold ourselves to it and then figure out if it's not working, what's going wrong. And also if, as the times change, things need to be added. This graphic is a little bit hard to kind of follow, but basically the main point is that the amendment needs to get reintroduced every new Congress. So we'll be looking at that next year. Rick Nolan, who has been our lead from the beginning, he actually approached us initially and asked if he could be the first congressperson to introduce our amendment before we had it in Congress. He's retiring, and so we're in the process now of working to find a new lead, somebody who will partner with us to grow even more. And I'm pleased to say that we have some really good prospects on that, and I can't really say anything about that publicly yet, but we will have no problem getting it reintroduced in January next year with the new Congress. And so then now we turn to our current situation, right? Because we have all this growth, we have all this momentum, we have all this success, and we have the best solution to the problem. And yet we are right now in this situation where we are in a budget shortfall. And there are a number of reasons for that. A lot of them are external, because a lot of energy is being focused on the crisis that is everywhere you turn as a result of this Trump administration, right? And all the issues that were already at play before Trump became president that are coming to a head in terms of climate change, massive incarceration, privatization of our whole government. And that has people freaked out and is pulling energy and dollars and time, understandably so. But if we lose sight of the longer term solution, of the big picture, of where we really need to go, and we just focus, I like this story of, these people come upon all these babies in the water. They see these babies floating on the river, and they run in and they go to grab the baby, rescue the drowning baby. And then all of a sudden there's another wave of babies, and they run in and they go to rescue the babies. And then before they know it, the river's just full of babies, and they cannot grab all the babies. And some of them are slipping by, and they're, in crisis. And then this woman chooses to go up the river and leave. And everyone's like, where are you going? Where are you going? Stop. We need you here. And she's like, I'm going to find out who's throwing these babies in this freaking river, and I'm going to stop them, right? So we need to keep our eye on the upriver, on the legal precedents, and on the fact that the Constitution can now be used against us by corporations, and the law can be used against us by corporations and the wealthy when we're trying to protect our communities. And if we don't work on that, then we're never going to be able to keep up. And so unfortunately, we're having trouble convincing folks of that, just under the urgency of the situation. And so, some of you are diehard committed and understand this, but a lot of folks think, okay, Citizens United's been around for a while, and people are starting to get cynical. People know it's bad, but feel like there's no solution. And so that's part of our job, and that's part of where we could do better, obviously, if we're in a shortfall. But the other thing is that we are grassroots funded. We have this amazing pool of 450,000 people who have signed our petition. We have about 160,000 emails. And if everybody was giving monthly in a small amount that almost anybody can do, $5 a month, if you can do more, 10. If you can do more, 28, that's how much I give. If everybody was actually pitching in on that level, we would have enough to make our budget no problem, because we're one of the most frugal organizations out there, certainly at the national level for sure. And there would still be resources to help save the babies too. And so that's a culture shift that we need to create internally that we haven't done as good a job on as we should. So this is kind of our current way that our budget is set up on the right. And you can see those monthly sustainers really are not as much of the budget as they probably should be. And then this gives you a sense of kind of how we spend our funds. This is who we are. This is our team at the national level. And then can't unfortunately put faces to all of the many affiliate groups out there, but all of these little bubbles represent, other groups of people who are working at the local level in their communities. And we're, committed to making sure that Move to Amend's board and our staff team is representative of this country, is in, I'm in California where our headquarters is, but we have folks all over the country because this is a really diverse country. And, the culture in California is really different than the culture in, Florida, in the culture in Missouri. And we want to make sure that we, understand that and are working with folks on the ground as well. So we're structured around mostly our local affiliate groups, and then we have our national team, which is made up of our staff and our board and our interns. So we are a grassroots volunteer-led organization. You can see, we're trying to amend the Constitution on a budget of less than $600,000. If you're not involved in, organizational development, that might sound like a lot, but that is not a lot in terms of what we're trying to do. And we can get it done on that much. Certainly if we can get more, then we'll, maybe be able to move faster and do even more. But we already are able to stretch a dollar more. I am sitting in my home because we all work from our homes, and I also open up my home to my coworkers here in Sacramento to save funds and things like that. So we don't have big staff, we don't have big salaries, and we don't have a lot of overhead. We use our resources really well. So the number one way that you can help is to make a donation. And if you're not already a donor, maybe you're partly here because you wanted to kind of understand better why you should invest in this movement. So I hope we made the case. We need to raise $150,000 to catch up on our budget shortfall that actually started kind of going back all the way to the presidential election, but really came to a head last year as folks sort of got a real sense of what it was like to live under Trump. And also people don't open their emails anymore. People don't answer the phone. And so, we're having trouble reaching our list. And so ideas on that are welcome. And then the most critical way you can help, if you agree that this issue is fundamental, then we need you to give monthly. We need you to become a sustainer. All of our members of our national team give monthly, even those of us who are paid by the organization and could stand to, make some more money from the organization. If we were working somewhere else, we probably would. But we invest because we care about this. Almost all of our affiliate folks are sustainers, and more of them are coming on. We've had 103 new people come on as monthly donors this month, and that's amazing and great. But what we need to get to is that we raise $50,000 a month in sustaining donations, because if we did that, then we would make our budget and we would never have the situation happen again, and we could focus on the organizing and the movement building and the education, and we would not have to make these pitches and be in this crisis and situation. So that's where we're trying to move to get. But we certainly don't want to just have folks be invested using their dollars, right? So you could start a Move to Amend group. We are grassroots. We can help you get started. You can come to the Leadership Summit. We still have openings and spots if you want to join us in DC, June 8th through 11th. And if you're not ready to start a group or kind of invest that much, then share our petition. Share the motion to amend with all of your friends and family and coworkers. And the more we grow, the bigger pool that is to help share the load in all the ways, right? And so if you haven't asked everyone you know yet to sign the petition, then that's another really easy thing that you can do right now. So I want to open it up to any questions or comments. I'm also looking at Facebook, so if there's anything that folks want to add there, we can see that. And we actually can stay on a little bit longer if folks have longer questions, but also recognize that we said we'd keep this to an hour. So if you want to jump off, then go ahead, but also make sure that the next place you go is movetoamend.org/monthly to make that monthly donation. So if you've got a question, you can either click on the Q&A button at the top of your screen and then type your question. And then you can also type your question in the chat at the bottom of the screen if you want to do it that way, if it's easier. Either way. So let's see. Nathan asked, do we only need 4 states to call a convention? Which states are likely to pass the amendment next? Well, we need 2/3 of states to call for a convention, and there is, there are some unknowns with the convention. So there are a number of states that have called for a convention on different topics. The way that we look at it and the way that we think that the experts that we agree with see it is that you need 2/3 of state legislatures to call for a convention on the same topic. So we definitely need more than 4. And a lot of the states that have passed resolutions have not done so calling for a convention. They've just called on Congress to pass the amendment. So the states that are, and then the other thing too is that what we think is the most powerful way to have a state call for a convention, or I'm sorry, call for the amendment would be through ballot initiative, because then that's the voters voting directly. So not every state is able to do a ballot initiative process. So one of the states that we're targeting next is Minnesota. We're also working with folks in Massachusetts, and Illinois has already passed a resolution, but it could be stronger. So that's another key state. And then Ohio is one of our strongest states, but we've done local ballot initiatives in Ohio. So we're working on the state legislature there as well. Although we're more excited on growing at the local level and not jumping to the state level too soon. And so it actually really varies state to state, kind of what strategically makes sense and if they have the initiative process. So it's kind of a complicated answer to your question. But Nathan, one of the things that would be helpful to know is where you live, and if we could help you figure out what makes the most sense where you are. Anybody else have any questions for me or George? Let's see, Barbara says, whenever someone mentions Citizens United or anything to do with corporate overreach, I tell them to look into Move to Amend. I have the flyers taped to my window in my shop downtown. That's awesome. I don't know where you are, Barbara, but that's great. And it's so awesome when a business is clear that you don't support corporate personhood either, because it actually really isn't something that benefits small businesses. It's something that you have to have the money to sue government and get the Supreme Court to agree with you, which they will, make it sound like that's pro-business all around and that we're anti-business. But the reality is that it's only the giant corporations that are able to assert their rights. Bradford, Pennsylvania, that's awesome. Thank you for your support. And I know there's some businesses that carry our petition, that put the petition on the counter, so you could do that if you want to. And I hope that you ask your friends and family to join Move to Amend officially and come on as sustainers. So it looks like
you might hear from people who say, oh, don't we need to just overturn Citizens United and it'll be done? Well, without disrespecting or shaming those folks by saying, no, that's completely wrong, remind folks that we're talking about a core system change. Just looking at some of the cases Caitlin shared tonight, this isn't a problem that happened only 10 years ago. It goes back a very long way. So changing this situation so that we, the people, are actually sovereign, we are actually making decisions and telling corporations what their duties are limited to instead of having free reign everywhere, that takes a movement. That takes us to have the power to get what we need and hold that power. So that's not just going to happen by, there's not a quick fix. Our culture likes quick fixes. This is not that situation, but we do have a plan. Thanks for your support.
Right on. So next steps, we do have a survey at the end if you want to give us your feedback. And if you're listening on Facebook, it's movetoamend.org/webinar-feedback, and you can give us your feedback too. And you can contact us if you have any questions. But most importantly, please make a contribution and share this link. As of today, we're at 63,000. So we're kind of in the mid-month slump, to be honest. We're still, and we've also pivoted a little bit to try and bring in more sustainers. And so those are those monthly donors, and those are not necessarily as big amounts. So we're having some conversations with some of our larger donors. We do have a few of those, but not very many, next week, and hopes that they can kind of help us shore up the difference. But it's really going to come from all of us pitching in all that we can. So it's critical that you join us, and then probably also are going to need to ask everyone that you know who you think would also agree with you to join you as well. And so making a monthly donation is the most helpful way to do that. And if everybody pitches in, it doesn't have to hurt too much, and it's sustainable and viable. And, we wouldn't want to get, $100,000 from one person, and then who is that person, and what kind of influence do they have in our organization, and who are that they have $100,000 laying around anyways? Like, what have they done to get that, right? But if there's, 1,000 of us giving 10, then that makes so much more of a difference, and is more, sustainable if somebody has to step away, but also makes it so that we're not beholden to anyone except for those 1,000 people, et cetera. And that's who we want to be accountable to. We want to be accountable to you, not the wealthy. So help us do that by making it so that we don't have to go beg for funds from the wealthy, because they're probably not going to give us money anyway, but we don't even want to have to ask. So Linda points out that Greg, our outreach director, Linda's one of our affiliate coordinators, she's in Montana, Move to Amend is not about an issue, it's about changing the rules of the system, which have gotten us to this place and keep democracy from working for all of us. That's absolutely right. And if it's sort of like the Thoreau quote, for every 100 people that are hacking at the branches of the tree of oppression and injustice, there's one that is hacking at the root, and Move to Amend is one of those root organizations. We are not the only one. There are others that do good root systemic work, but they are few and far between compared. And so we have to invest and support those organizations that make it so that the rules would change, so that we actually can move forward and not continuously fight the same fight. So I hope we've made our case. I hope you'll join us. If you have questions, please contact us. Thanks, George, for joining me tonight. And is there anything else that you want to add?
Nope. It's a pleasure to be part of the team, including everyone on the phone. Hang in there. Keep up the good fight. We're going to get there. And thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening. And thanks for being part of Move to Amend.
All right.